Thank you very much, Zara, and happy Tuesday, everybody. I am speaking to you from Long Island, epicenter of the COVID virus. Thankfully, things seem to be getting better, but my wife and I have been hunkered down for a matter of weeks. I haven't had the chance to hug my kids for a number of weeks, and I don't know about you, but it's been tough not to have that personal touch, that personal connection. So today's webinar is targeted towards learning and development professionals, and where it came from was just having more time than normal on my hands and not knowing exactly what to do with it. And I found myself kind of resigned to just being in the house and kind of lolling around. And then something clicked in me that said, hey, you can be using this time. So one of the things that I'd wanted to do is to get involved in developing webinars, and this is the first in a series that we'll be doing. I've wanted to get involved in podcasting, so I researched podcasting, and we're going to be starting a podcast over the next couple of weeks. And it got me thinking, what can learning and development people be doing right now to better their careers? And so that's the premise behind the webinar. Real quickly about me, I am the founder and president of Knowledge Staff. My company is a consulting and staffing company that is fully dedicated to the learning and development space. We have three primary areas that we specialize. The first is traditional corporate learning and development. The second is healthcare IT training. And the third is something called activation support, where we provide one-on-one support to doctors and clinicians inside of hospitals when software goes live. Our company provides staffing and consulting services, so we work with consultants, and we also help people find full-time permanent jobs in the learning and development space. And I've been involved in L&D for over 30 years. I've supported people finding new jobs. I've worked with consultants. I've supported clients in designing learning solutions. In any given year, Knowledge Staff is probably hiring between 200 and 300 consultants per year. So we hire an awful lot of people. So a lot of what you're going to hear today comes from that 30-year perspective. It's my assessments, there are assertions that I'll be making, but I am not the end all. And my hope is that when I open up this webinar to questions and ideas, that you all contribute and add whatever expertise or insight or wisdom that you can to have this be as effective as possible. So with that said, I am going to hide myself and we'll get going. So the agenda today is going to talk a little bit about reading the water. Anyone that has ever heard me speak or seen me speak or read anything that I've written, it's a topic that I talk about a lot. It's something that I think is mission critical for anybody to have a resilient and successful career. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the next four areas, we'll talk specifics about what can you be doing now that you've read your water. What actions can you be taking to support yourself in your own professional development and to have it so that your career is more resilient to market downturns, so that you'll be less prone to being laid off or fired. But we'll talk about specifics. At the end, we'll have a time for question and answer. But again, I'll be posing questions to you as well. So let me start by just asking a quick poll. If you can just indicate in the chat window, in terms of your satisfaction with your career and the development of your career, would you say that you are very satisfied, satisfied, somewhat dissatisfied, or dissatisfied in your career? So the standards are, the metrics would be very satisfied, satisfied, somewhat dissatisfied, and dissatisfied. If you can quickly just type something into the chat window, let us know. And Cesara, in 15 to 20 seconds, you can let us know how it turned out.
Sure. Okay, so it seems like the messages have come in. We have mostly satisfied, and we have only one somewhat dissatisfied. Is there anyone on the phone who can unmute? who would like to just mention, you don't have to mention your name, but satisfied, somewhat dissatisfied. Okay, so we have another dissatisfied. We have a private message for dissatisfied. Okay, so Ross, again, we have mostly satisfied, but we do have some who are saying that they are dissatisfied.
Okay, good. All right, very good. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about reading the water, and I'll use an analogy. My passion is to do something called surf casting. So let me real quickly go back and show you something very fast. Okay, great. So I use these kinds of objects. They're usually made out of wood or out of plastic. And I use them to try and catch striped bass and to catch bluefish. And in this picture, that's me on the right-hand side. I'm standing on the rock in the middle of a beautiful cove at Block Island. And for me, this is kind of what I use to keep my sanity. I use it to keep my center. It helps me to get rejuvenated. And 4 or 5 nights a week in the middle of the summer, in the wee hours of the summer, I'll be out somewhere along Long Island's waterways trying to catch fish. And I've been doing this for about 15 years. When I first started, it was a matter of just throwing out the lure and bringing the lure in. And over the years, what I've learned is that there's many things that I need to be aware of that really contribute to my success. And it never ends. I'm always learning something new. I'm always trying to uncover new methods that would have me become more effective in being able to get a fish to hit some inanimate object. I don't use bait. I only use lures, and all the fish that I catch, I release. For me, it's the sport of trying to get a fish to hit the lure and to catch the fish. So for me, when I compare myself to other surf casters, and I do compete competitively in surf casting competitions, and over the past 5 or 10 years, I traditionally will rank in the top 10 overall. But I see things that other people don't see, and I hear things that other people don't see, and I smell things that other surf casters don't see. And it all goes into me becoming successful in being able to be a successful surf caster. So I'm always modifying and adjusting my approaches. And the thing that I recognize is that conditions are always changing. So the analogy here is that while this is what is successful for me, you have your reading of your water, and you have it as it pertains to the learning and development industry. So I've identified a few that I think are important. The first things that I would recommend that learning and development keep abreast of is the economy. So the economy can play havoc on any industry, and we're kind of seeing it right now. But what's important to keep mindful of is which industries are hot and which industries are not, and taking a look at your background and trying to get a sense, are you too concentrated in one industry? So for people that are heavily concentrated in financial services, traditionally in a market downturn and recession, financial services gets hammered. So if your entire experience has been spent supporting banking or brokerage applications, you might find it difficult to make that transition. And let me preface that by saying that I personally recognize that learning and development people are learning and development people, and it doesn't make a difference what industry you've worked in. But unfortunately, a lot in the hiring community don't believe that way. They're always going to look for something that's similar to what they do. The other thing to be mindful of is what influence the government leaders have. So different administrations have different priorities. Different priorities require different investments. So sometimes the new, if I was working for an organization that was dedicated to clean water or clean air technology, and I saw an administration coming in that was laxing controls on those, I might start to wonder about the future of my job. So it's little things like that that can help you to read your water, read the economy, to see what impact that might have on your career. The second thing that I would recommend in terms of reading your water is, what are the new approaches? What are the new methods that are showing up within the learning and development So approaches are happening all the time, different methods. Within our own landscape today, what we're seeing are things like measurement and ROI becoming important. We're seeing mobile and social learning. We're seeing micro learning. We're seeing more emphasis being placed on gamification. We're seeing a new discipline called learning experience design and neuro learning. All of these new approaches and methods have an impact in your career. So if you're not keeping abreast of where the industry is going and what's important, you can find yourself a little bit behind the 8 ball. The next area that I would have you focus on is technology. So technology impacts us all, and for many of us, or most of us, we utilize technology in designing and developing learning solutions. So it's important to keep abreast of technology. What are the new authoring tools that are coming out? What are some of the new standards? We've had SCORM, but now we have XAPI and TinCan. We have the utilization of video becoming more and more prevalent in learning solutions, and virtual learning becoming more and more important. So technology can hold also some valuable insights in terms of where you are, where the market's going, and what actions you might need to take. The next area is what I call thought leaders. So there are people in our industry, people like Elliot Macy and Josh Burson, Allison Rossett and Jeannie Meister. These are people that I like to keep abreast in terms of what they're writing about. And in my experience, these thought leaders are right about 80 to 90% of the time. So it's extremely important to identify who those thought leaders are in your world. And they could be people that are industry recognized experts. They could be peers that you see are continually ahead of the leading edge. They could be mentors. They could be managers, people that you can talk to about what they see, about where they see the industry going. So that would be thought leaders, and I think that's important. And the last would be threats. So in every industry, occasionally there are significant threats to the industry itself. With the advent of the internet, industries like the travel industry and others face significant threats, and if they didn't adapt, they were out of business. So I don't really see that kind of a threat for the learning and development space. But there was a threat that showed up about 5 or 10 years ago, in my eyes, when the human resources profession redefined themselves as either human capital management or talent development. For me, that was a bit of a threat, because suddenly, in just about every case, learning and development, professional development, leadership development suddenly fell under the human resources or the talent management, talent development umbrella. And I think we even had our own industry change their name to Association for Talent Development and took the whole word training out of it. So for me, that meant that learning and development professionals really needed to broaden their horizons. They didn't need to be experts in things like succession planning and performance management, but the more exposure that you had in those areas made you more marketable. So I think threats are things that you always want to be wary of, and threats can sometimes uncover actions that you want to take to support the continued development of your career. So these are the 5 areas that I think are important for any learning and development professional to monitor continually, and this way that you can read your own water and support your career development. So I want to just throw out real quickly to everybody, are there any other areas that you think should be added to this list? Other areas that are important in terms of reading your water? Are there things that you keep track of, keep mindful of? So if you could just add that, I'll give you about 25 seconds to add something into the chat window, and if you could do that, I would appreciate it.
Great. We have someone who says burnout, the learning professional and burnout. You have a few more seconds. Anybody else? Great. So we have burnout. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought, and you know, that work-life balance that we all look for, I think that's a really good point to put on here, and to take assessment of your current role, your current responsibilities, and does it work? Is it working for you? Is it working for the entirety of your life? So thank you for that contribution. So for me, I think that this is a really good time to reflect. I work with a lot of people in the learning and development field, and there are people that I find that are very focused. They know where they are, and they know where they want to go, and they have a very good sense of how they're going to get there. And there are other people that I find less clear. They don't have that clarity. And for me, the distinction is that the people that have that clarity have a mindful or purposeful career, and the people that don't tend to be in what I call career drift. The career is just going on. There's not a lot of purpose to it. There's not a lot of direction. There's not a lot of ambition. And invariably, in my experience, the people that have a purposeful career or are mindful of their career and their direction tend to have much more successful careers. They tend to make more than other people. So I offer this section as a way for you to become maybe more mindful, maybe more purposeful in your career. So the first question is my career progressing in the correct direction and pace? And to be able to answer this question, you have to have some sense of where you are and where you want to go. So that the previous question, or the question about kind of where you are and where you want to go, would precede this one. But for those of you that have a sense and are in an opportunity, is it working? Are you moving forward in the direction that you want to move quick enough? And are you moving in the right direction? If you have an ambition to move from being an individual contributor to being someone that gets to manage projects and manage people, are you moving in that direction? And if not, what actions might you want to take? And it's not always that you have to leave a job or an opportunity, but it could be that there's a missing conversation. The second question is, given where I want to go, do I have the requisite skills and experience to get there? So an example of this is I find people that come to me with a certain skill set and experience and an ambition for a job that they're not suited for. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they can't do that job, but from a marketability standpoint, they don't have the same presentation to a prospective employer than others do. So it's important to make sure that, given the ambitions that you have for yourself and your career, that you've got the right skills and experience to support yourself in getting there. So I think this is a very important question in terms of where you are and where you want to go. And the third question is probably most important, is what's missing? And as I mentioned, it's not always leaving an opportunity. Sometimes it's having that conversation with your manager to talk about your ambitions and to see if the company and your manager supports it, and if so, what the action plan is. In some cases, it's learning that you don't have. It's exposure to an emerging trend or technology that you haven't been exposed to. So it's important that as you're reflecting, that you take the time to jot it down, get it out of your head, put it down in writing, and take a look at what some of those mixing actions might be. And you can also talk to your boss, or talk to managers, or talk to mentors, or talk to people like myself in the staffing and consulting industry. Now, here's where I am. Here's where I want to go. What's missing? Am I set up to get where I want to go in the time frame that I want to get there? So now that we have reflected, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you actually can be doing. So we've got this time on our hands, and some of that time can be spent to increase our knowledge. We all know that there are emerging trends and approaches and methods, and it doesn't necessarily mean that what we have to do is go back for a 4-year degree or a master's degree or go for some formal certification. We can just learn it. And there's so much access available on the internet through white papers. There are great books. These are just some of the books that I have been exposed to. The Fifth Discipline was written probably 25 years ago. It's still a relevant book, very good. Josh Berson's book on training measurements, one of the better ones that I've seen. And all that you have to do is go on to the internet, Google, top books for learning and development professionals, and you'll find 15, 20, 30, 40 different lists. So find one that seems to resonate for you and go out there and get that book. What's interesting, I found that a lot of the public libraries are offering free access to their books and their audiobooks. I've been accessing the library at the New York Public Library because I'm a New York resident. And I've been checking out some audiobooks, and you'd be surprised at the selection that's available. So clearly books and white papers are things that I would certainly look at in terms of investing and increasing your knowledge of various areas within the learning and development space. So real quickly, are there any books that anyone thinks are worth noting, books that made a difference for you, books that you think are incredible that any learning and development professionals should read? We'll take maybe 20 seconds. If you can add any book that you think is worth mentioning to the group here, I would appreciate that.
Oh, great. So yes, for those of you who are putting questions there, yes, I will make sure that Ross answers those questions. Ross, while people are actually putting the book there, there's a question that we have. Do you want to take the question now, or do you want to wait a little bit later?
Let's take it now.
Sure. Okay. So we have a question from someone who says, are there sources on how to translate what I have done in higher education into the workplace outside of academia?
So can you just repeat that one more time?
Sure. So we have a question here, and this is from an administrator, a university administrator. So the question is, are there sources on how to translate what I have done in higher education into the workplace outside of academia? So what I have done in higher education as a professor and an actual executive administrator, how to translate what I have done in those roles into the workplace outside of academia.
Yeah, I personally don't know of any sources for that kind of guidance. I can tell you that over the years, I've worked with people that have made the transition from higher ed into the corporate sector. It's not easy. But I think what's important is to take a look at the experience that you have that is relevant and applicable to the corporate sector. So developing a course, analyzing requirements, working with subject matter experts, working with stakeholders, those kinds of activities would be what you would want to focus on, and have it be more suited towards a commercial corporate audience than a typical higher ed. I typically find that our resumes are 10-page CVs that just have no applicability for a business resume. So for that person, if you'd like to reach out to me after the webinar, I'd be happy to talk to you a little bit about that. The next webinar that we're going to be doing is entitled Resumes That Produce Results, and we'll be talking about some of those concepts. But that's what I can offer.
That's great. So we do have some of the books. So someone just said, Marlia said that she actually put the Fifth Discipline in her Amazon cart today. We have Jennifer who says Radical Candor is one of the books that she suggests as well.
Great. What was the first book, Cesara?
The first one was also the Fifth Discipline. So the Fifth Discipline as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, that was a impactful book for me years ago, and it still is. Okay, so thanks for those suggestions. So in addition to books and white papers, we have blogs, and there are many good blogs out there. I've listed the ones that I think are top. These are people that I consider to be not only great bloggers, but also thought leaders. And I would take a look at one or two or three of these and just see what these people are talking about. Great way to keep abreast of the market. Again, keeping your pulse on your water And while this is not something that you would read, there are also great podcasts. TED Talks has a whole section on education. The podcast from the people at Emerald Works, Good Practice is very good. Chief Learning Officer has their podcast. Again, these are typically 30, 45 minutes in length. If you've got the time, I would certainly recommend keeping abreast of some podcasts in addition to some blogs. So the next thing, sorry.
I'm sorry, we do have some private questions about the slides. Yes, so we can make the slides available, Ross, afterwards. So later on, we can actually email participants the slides. So how do you feel about that?
I feel great about it.
Okay, sure. So yes, for those who are asking me privately, yes, we'll make the slides available to you.
Yeah, and what we'll also do is we will try and summarize the questions that we received. And if there are any questions that we don't get to, we'll make sure that we answer those after the webinar. So the final area within learning is, or the next area is to learn. And again, you don't require a degree, you don't require a certificate. There's incredible learning out there. YouTube is an unbelievable source of learning on topics related to pretty much everything, but also to training and development. LinkedIn Learning offers a 30-day free membership. You can try it out for 30 days. And there are great videos on different topics: gamification, neuroscience learning, measurement, agile instructional design, all these areas that are kind of emerging. You can sit through a video or two and have a basic understanding of what's going on and what's involved. And you can drill down as deep as you want with this training. I personally find that the quality of the learning and the learning programs on LinkedIn Learning are better than what I find on YouTube. I think what you have to do on YouTube is really weed through to find the better ones. But through these two sources, you could pretty much find learning on any topic related to our industry. And then also with learning is the whole issue of technology. So if you look at job descriptions that are posted on LinkedIn, on Indeed, or any other job board, in about 80 to 90% of the cases, you're going to see the words Captivate and Articulate. These are the two most popular e-learning authoring tools out there. And, you know, there are intricacies involved in the software, but for many people, it's kind of like learning PowerPoint on steroids. And both Adobe and Articulate offer 30-day trial versions of their software. And in 30 days, you can learn this software. You could learn it based on the tutorials that the companies offer. You can learn it based on training that's included on LinkedIn Learning and on YouTube to accelerate your learning. But within 30 days, you not only could have a decent understanding about these tools, but you can actually come away with a working sample. So imagine if you dedicated yourself to 30 days to learn this software, and you were able to put that on your resume, and you got an interview, and someone said, tell me a little bit about your experience working with Captivate or Articulate. And your answer went from being, I've never used it, to, no, I really haven't had the privilege to utilize this software in my current job. I'm committed to moving into the e-learning space. And over the last 30 days, I've actually learned the product on my own. And let me show you a sample that I developed. You suddenly turn a negative of not knowing the software into a positive that shows your initiative, it shows your drive, and it shows the quality of your work. So I highly recommend learning these applications, getting exposure to Audacity and things like it. And then what I would also recommend is using this time to get your samples in order. We're all going to need them at some time in our careers. And the worst time is when you've been laid off, because in most cases, you can't get access to those files. Clients want to see finished products, but they also want to see work in product. They want to see storyboards. They want to see design documents. They want to see project plans. They want to see your e-learning modules, and they want to see samples of your work. So now is the time to accumulate those. And then the next thing that you really want to work on is getting your online portfolio in order. There's no better way to make a first impression other than your resume than to have a really nice, well-designed, well-presented online portfolio that should include a personal statement about yourself, maybe something that indicates what differentiates you from everyone else, something that exhibits your various samples, and something that also includes your resume and contact information. And there are free sites that you can use to do that. Adobe Portfolio, Behance, I believe, offers a free platform. But now, if you have the time, would be a great time to invest in putting together an online portfolio. So those are the items that I really wanted to talk about in terms of how you can utilize your time. We're getting close to the hour mark. But again, to kind of summarize, I think that it's extremely important that reading your water becomes a practice that you do once or twice a year. Take a look, take stock of where you are, where the industry is, how your career is progressing, figure out what it is that you might need to do, and to take the time to invest in yourself. I think everyone should have their own learning and development budget. You can't rely on your employer to provide it. Hopefully they can, but everyone should take $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a year that you can invest in learning that you see as important, or conferences that you want to attend. And then finally, by reading your water and investing yourself, you'll start to reap the rewards. You'll find yourself less prone to market downturns. You'll find yourself in more demand by prospective employers. And ultimately, you'll be more in control of the pace and the progression of your career. So that pretty much wraps up what I was hoping to talk about today. Are there any questions that anyone wanted to put on the table?
So if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and type them into the chat menu, or you can also send me a private message again, and I will make sure to relay that anonymously to Ross. So we have one question. So we have a private question. During this sort of pandemic or even challenging times where people are laid off, someone wants to know, how can they learn a new technology when they are lacking finances because they have been laid off, or they're concerned about finances because they've been laid off?
Yeah, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I would first of all, YouTube is a great place to go. So if there's a technology that you want to learn, just put that technology in the search window and start looking at those videos. If you want to sign up for the 30-day free trial version on LinkedIn, I would go ahead and do it. You'll be surprised at all the learning that's involved. It's a huge, huge library, and the quality is very good. From a technology standpoint, the Articulate and the Adobe Captivate downloads, I think, would also be wise investments. I also want to let people know that the next webinar is going to be on Tuesday, the 28th of April. So 2 weeks from today, same time, 12:15. The topic will be resumes that produce results. I also wanted to offer my personal driver in business has always been supporting people in their career development. And the disappointment that I have is that I'm not able to find employment opportunities for everybody. In fact, if you look at it from a number standpoint, it's probably only a small percentage of the people that I come in contact with. But I'm more than happy to talk to people, to talk to you, to answer questions, to provide whatever guidance or support that I can in your career development and in your search for new opportunities. So if that's something that you'd like to take advantage of, my contact info is there, and I'd be happy to provide whatever support I can.
And we have 15 more minutes, and we have quite a few questions that have come in. So we have one question that says, any advice for someone who is in mid-career with a lot of experience, but who wants to change directions? For example, perhaps they want to be considered for roles in banking when their background is in healthcare or the pharmaceutical industry.
Great question. So there are a couple of things that you can do. If you are active in the ATD or the ISPI, there may be a special interest group that's focused on financial industry or the banking industry. You might be able to go into the member directory and find people that are working in that industry just to see what their assessments are. Very often the answer to your question can lie in the job descriptions that banks and brokerage firms and financial companies put up on the internet. They'll talk about the skills and experience. You can do research of the banking industry and what the banking industry is all about and how banks operate and how the various operating units work together. Any investment that you make in that direction will make you more marketable and make you more relevant to those companies. And by doing that kind of research, you can put a line on the resume right at the top that says familiar with banking operations and banking processes, or something like that, that suddenly has you show up as being relevant or more relevant than not having that experience currently. So I think those would be some of the things that I would look at. You know, doing some research, reading some books on how banks operate, how internal organizations operate, what the different parts of a bank are, what are some of the regulatory or compliance issues that banks are concerned with. You can find that information on the internet without much difficulty.
So we have another question. This question says, I plan to invest in getting the CPT D certified through ATD by the end of this year. Is anyone on here certified? And so have you seen a direct ROI in your career? So actually, this question is open to everyone. You can actually reply back to Marlia on the chat menu. So that's fine as well. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Ross, or if you want to go to the next question.
Yeah, I think that's a great certification to have. We've worked with many people that have that certification. My overall assessment is that the people that have that assessment tend to be what I consider to be in the top 10, 15% of people in the industry. The orientation that certification gives you is a business-focused, business results orientation, which I think is extremely important. And I think that it was a great move on your part, and I hope that you enjoy it.
Okay, great. We have another question. The question is, where do you see the healthcare industry going from the technology standpoint after this pandemic is over? Oh, that's a great question.
So the question is specific to the healthcare technology?
Correct. So where do you see the healthcare industry going from the technology standpoint after the pandemic is over?
Okay. So over the last, so we do an awful lot of work with hospitals. That's probably the largest market share industry that we have in our market share. And the investment that's been made in electronic medical records and electronic health record software, and these are products like Epic. You may have heard of Epic, Allscripts, large applications that basically manage the hospital from registration through billing and discharge and everything in between. Companies have made huge investments in this software, and it continues to be made. So I don't foresee that the landscape is going to change much in terms of technology. I think that companies will continue to invest in EMR and EHR applications. And then I think what we've all seen is the whole utilization of telehealth and telemedicine is something that will probably continue. I have benefited from visiting my doctor through telehealth. I had a visit. My wife has had a visit. Telehealth, basically, telemedicine is basically the providing of clinical and medical visits through technology, in virtual technology. Telehealth refers to other types of healthcare related services that rather than being done in person can be done virtually. So I think both platforms and technologies for delivering telehealth and telemedicine would probably be the two areas that I'd point to.
So we have another question, a private question. Can we please get an invitation to the next webinar so we can populate on our calendars? So I know that we have been getting quite many people who've been wanting to make sure that their calendars are automatically populated. So I know what we can do. Once we get the Eventbrite, we will go ahead and take your email address from there if you registered, and we can go ahead and send you an invitation to the next webinar, and you will have features on that email that will allow you to actually populate the calendar. So it'll say like add to your Google Calendar, add to your Yahoo Calendar, your Outlook, etc. So we can go ahead and do that. So Ross, one more time, can you please state the next webinar that will be coming up and the date and time as well?
Yeah, I'll do that. Let me ask a quick question first, Cesara.
Sure.
So after hearing me spout on about time and actions that you can be taking to support your career development, what's the one thing after hearing what you heard today that you think that you can do that would support you in having a more resilient career? What's missing from your bag of tricks? What experience or exposure do you think is lacking given where the market is going and what the market is currently calling for? So if you just take a couple of seconds to think about that, and just real quickly in the chat window, what's that one action that you see that you can take that might support yourself in terms of moving forward in your career?
And again, if you want to be anonymous, you can go ahead on the bottom where it says send to and just send it to Cesara Johnson, and I'll go ahead and announce that anonymously.
And while people are doing that, so the next seminar again will be resumes that produce results. It'll be 2 weeks from today, Tuesday, April 28th at 12:15. What we'll be talking about in that webinar are time-tested actions that you can use in working with your resume that will greatly increase the number of interviews that you get. And the only thing that a resume is good for is generating the interview. If your resume is not generating the interview, it's not working. So we'll talk about that, and I invite you to attend that webinar as well.
And please be sure to share the link with another colleague, at least 1 or 2 colleagues who you believe will benefit from these webinars, because once again, how often do you get a chance to get this kind of inside advice from a leading consulting and staffing expert? So please take advantage of that. So we do have some answers to your question before that about what, okay, good. So about what they may be missing. So we have someone who says that they're missing connecting with others who have done what I would like to do. Also, we see accessing the sources such as books and YouTube videos to help me. Someone else has said that they plan to look more into the learning and development, and also looking into where I want my career path to go. So doing more introspection.
Great. Excellent. Excellent. Any other questions?
Any additional questions? Okay, so we have a question. The question is, I am typically an introvert, and as an introvert, how do I network or meet with other people to get more advice or to be mentored or to receive more advice on where to go to next?
Oofa, that is a difficult one. I don't know that I have a really good answer for that. I think you know, the action that's missing is probably throwing yourself into situations that are not comfortable. So one of the ways that you might want to try is to become more active in professional society meetings. You can go to those meetings and really be as outgoing as you want to be. I've been to many meetings where some people are networking and doing a lot of that. There are other people that are pretty much keeping to themselves. I think over time, if you go to society meetings more often, you'll build friendships, you'll build trust. Hopefully your guard will let down a little bit, and you'll be able to get the benefit out of the community that you might be able to. That's all that I can offer, unfortunately.
That's great. And once again, one of the reasons why Ross and Knowledge Staff wanted to start this webinar was to make sure that the community engages with one another and also to give back to the community. So we thank you, Marlia. Marlia actually answered the question as well, and she said that, hey, you can start with connecting with her as well. So for the people who are on our webinar, feel free to connect with one another on LinkedIn. Great, we have Steve. Steve commented that introverts are often great listeners, and you can leverage that. Everyone wants to be listened to and understood. That's great info, Steve. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any other questions? We have 5 more minutes before we end.
So rather than sit in silence, I want to wish everybody well, you and yours, and I'm encouraged that the reports seem to be of an improving health climate out there. Hopefully it continues. Hopefully we all are mindful of what we're being told from both government officials and health officials. I appreciate you participating. I'm looking forward to business getting back to usual. I'm not sure it's ever going to be, or it will take a while to get back to whatever usual was. But the encouraging thing is that we're actually seeing more business activity. We're seeing more requirements. Pretty much most things were put on hold, but we're now starting to see movement, and we're hoping that continues. So I do appreciate you attending the webinar. We hope that you attend the next one. And please feel free to reach out with any questions or any requests for support. And thank you again.
And everyone, oh, thank you, Marcel. Great. So we have people who are saying they're looking forward to the next one. This is awesome. Thank you, Steve. Also on the bottom, just remember, Ross has also included contact information for you. On the bottom right of the screen, telephone number 866-742-2410 or rsquire@knowledgestaff.com. You can also see his LinkedIn page at Ross Squire. And again, thank you so much.
Thanks, Cesare. You're the best.
Thank you, Ross. You're awesome. Great. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.